Hi, everybody. It's Kim with Alzheimer's Orange County, welcoming you to the final session of training for professionals serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Congratulations, you made it all the way to the final session, and I'm delighted to be with you today as we come around home plate, so to speak. As a reminder, the curriculum that we've been covering in our 3 sessions is was for the most part developed by the National Task Group on Intellectual Disabilities and Dementia Practices. And as you know, it was made possible through a grant that was made possible through the Administration for Community Living and awarded to the OMID Multicultural Institute for Development in collaboration with Alzheimer's Orange County. And I'm delighted to be with you and to have been your guide through these sessions. And just a little housekeeping. As before, I'd like to make this session interactive. In fact, we're going to be going through some case studies today and doing some review and exploring a couple of new topics as well. So let's just review really quickly what we talked about last time. The key topics were communication and behavior, and the communication was really essential because it lays the framework for how we handle these behavioral expressions when they occur. And we talked about things like our approach, how that matters, our body language, our tone of voice, our smiles. We talked about some strategies such as not arguing, not saying no. And we'll review these things again today because they're so important. We know that it's their reality and it can't change, but we can change. We can tweak the environment and we can reduce fear by paying more attention to their feelings than the actual words, because we know that in dementia care, they're going to lose their language. And you know, all of our clients or consumers are different. Some of them have a lower baseline and less language. Some may even be nonverbal. So for many of you, you're already used to problems with communication. But then we talked about behaviors. We talked about things like the ABC model, where we said, you know, we pay attention to what happens before the actual behavior, what happens afterwards, what's our reaction to that, how can we assess these behaviors going forward, maybe do some tweaks in the environment. It's almost like detective work, isn't it? We have to sort of dig below to the surface to see why these things are happening. And we discovered that behaviors don't occur randomly. There's usually some type of trigger at work. It could be a health issue, it could be pain or some type of physical discomfort. Anything from, oh my gosh, it could be a urinary tract infection or an injury that we don't know about. Or, you know, maybe their clothes aren't fitting properly or there's a pebble in their shoe. So pain or discomfort is something we want to rule out first. There could be something in the environment. Remember, we talked about sundowning and how late in the day, even the changing light can create shadows, leading people to hallucinate or have a delusion that they see people in the bushes, etc. Or it could be that we're asking them to do tasks that were always commonplace for them before, that they did almost by rote, but now with the advent of dementia, these tasks have become too complicated. We have to break them into simpler steps. And then we talked about redirection and the value of distraction as a very effective strategy for dealing with challenging behaviors. So keep top of mind always how the role of communication, effective communication, can really set the stage for reducing and maybe even eliminating some of the troubling behaviors that are so common in dementia care. And then we're going to we're going to talk today about, some best practices and, you know, just sort of summarize and review and pull some things together, pull together some loose strings, some loose threads before we end our training. So let's start by talking about how specifically our approach to caring for a person with Down syndrome must change when they now have Alzheimer's disease. And then I'm going to talk about 5 key concepts in dementia care. And some of them we've already discussed, but it never hurts to reinforce these concepts. So we'll talk about maintenance support, redirection, to orient or not to orient. This should say life stories, but it says live stories. So life stories and validation. And we'll understand how our supportive approach needs to extend to families of the individuals that we're caring for. And as a reminder, they're in really the highest risk group for Alzheimer's disease. And this is, now that Down syndrome people are living longer, just as the general population is, we're seeing more and more cases. And 100% of people with Down syndrome have the biological markers for the disease, the plaques and tangles that we talked about in our first session. However, not all people living with Down syndrome go on to develop the disease. But really, it is a shocking number of people do, in fact, develop it. And so classes such as these can help us as professionals prepare for that. And so thank you for your comment. And did you have any questions about the disease, or did you feel like we covered that adequately in the first session? Is the symptoms, and I mean, your feedback is really welcome, as we are always wanting to improve our courses. Let's go ahead and get started so that we can cover all the content, but I love the way you're participating. And Veronica, be sure and let me know if someone has their hand up. Thank you. So, as I've been saying, caring for a person once they have dementia means that we have to understand some basic tenets, and we know that that means that we know that the person just doesn't see the world the same way that we do. And what we see as normal can, in fact, be very confusing and very threatening, as evidenced by the story we just heard. Our world is sunny, their world can be a terrifying place. We have to enter into their reality, as it's too late for them to come back into our world. And so this requires us to be even more patient, even more supportive, and even more understanding. We're already doing all of these things with the population, that we're working with, but now it must be amplified. And to always remember that they can't change, but we can, and that's the good news. So we know we can't change them, but we can change. We can make changes to the environment. There's things we can do, but it's on us, it's not on them. And so I talked about this last time, and we talked about, the concept is rehabilitation versus habilitation, but in plain language, it really means that we have to start thinking about our clients or consumers in a different way. And I think actually this slide is a little bit easier to, to help us understand this concept. We're used to trying to work with clients and help them improve their skills. Once dementia is in the picture, we're going to shift our focus away from gaining skills to working with clients who are losing their skills. They're losing their skills now. So now our goal is not to help them improve, but to help them maintain. So we're going to help them maintain their functioning, and we're going to help them to keep it as high as possible for as long as possible. And our focus is going to be on safety. We're going to keep them safe, and we want to keep them comfortable. So it's all about their quality of life now and keeping them safe and comfortable. And yes, we want to keep them functioning as high as possible for as long as possible. So, you know, once they get dementia, we don't want to just kind of rush in and do everything for them. We want to help them do for themselves. But again, focus on safety, comfort, etc. Does that make sense? That's what we're about now. Once dementia is in the picture. So, and as I keep saying, I feel like a broken record. Who has to change? We do, because the behaviors that we're seeing are not their fault. They're due to the brain disease of Alzheimer's disease. And so, you know, the more we try to change or control them, the more resistance we're going to get. And, you know, I say this frequently, if we lower our expectations, we're going to lower their frustrations and our frustrations. So we're going to accommodate behaviors as long as everybody's safe. We're not going to try to control them. We're going to accommodate the behavior, not control it. And of course, the exception to that is when the person is a danger to themselves or others. And then, of course, that requires an immediate intervention. So I think I've used this example before, and I know I have with family caregivers. Sometimes, for some reason, people want to sleep on the floor. They're afraid of getting in the bed. No problem. You could spend the whole night trying to get them to go back to bed. And then, you know, both the person and you are sleepless all night. The easier way to deal with that is to just make sure they're comfortable on the floor. So we can change our behavior. We can maybe change the physical environment, and that can result in a change in behavior. So I want to cover these key concepts in dementia care. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, we've already talked about a little bit of this, but it's great review. Let's start with maintenance support, and then we'll talk more about redirection. Reorientation is really more of a should we or shouldn't we, life story, and then more about validation. So maintenance support is considered to be one of the best practices in dementia care. It's a proactive approach where we're going to focus on the support of remaining abilities. So what I was just talking about, it respects that this person is changing, and we want to support that by you know, providing dignified, meaningful, failure-free activities. So this is getting at what your question was, Mark, or your story rather. We want to allow that person to do as much as they can for themselves. At the same time, be aware that as this disease progresses, we're going to need to step in more and more assistance. So whether it's activities or helping them with their basic activities of daily living, you know, we go from just oversight to assist to more and more prompts, cues to assist. It's just it's a progression. So, and we know that using this concept, we can reduce or even stop difficult behaviors by making sure that our clients are not you know, by trying to reduce their reduce their frustration, boredom, anxiety, fear, etc. So we practice this in all settings. All staff can do this, everyone working in your center. We've been talking about this because it's one of the most effective tools you can use, redirecting and distracting. We do this whenever we see trouble starting, and we do it gently and effectively by just slipping in there and suggesting a desired activity, something we know this client or consumer enjoys. It can be food, it can be an activity that you know they like. It can be, I love this. It can be, can you help me? You know, people love to be needed. You can say something like, you know, would you mind helping me move the chairs? Um, we use our best body language. We move slowly, smile, all of those things that we've been talking about. We watch our body language because we know that even in a disease like Alzheimer's, where they're not understanding language anymore, verbal language, they're going to be able to read our body. So we smile, we relax, we're open and warm while we're redirecting. Um, if they're saying things that don't make sense or are not true, we might come back with something like, tell me about it. So in the example here, you've got a client that says they want to go home, and you know it's not time for them to go home. You might respond by saying, oh, tell me about your house. Is it big or is it close by? And then, you know, change the subject. With Alzheimer's disease, it's sort of hard, I mean, sort of easy, excuse me, to lose your train. It's easy to lose your train of thought. It's easy to redirect. So you can say, tell me about your house. And then in the next breath, you can say, you know what? I'm hungry. Are you? Let's go get a snack. So I know I make it sound easy. It's not, but the more we do this, the more we use these tools, the easier it gets. Does it work 100% of the time? No. But even if it works, you know, half the time or 3/4 of the time, that's the time that they're not going to act out. Or 3/4 of the time, you're going to reduce a behavior. So I think we've used this example before, someone saying, you know, I need to get to work, I'm going to miss my bus. The answer is, okay, Joe, but I just made breakfast. How about you eat with me first? It cracks me up how all these examples involve food. I know that would definitely work with me. You could redirect me anytime with food. So you see, everything works well, works better, I should say, than arguing with the person or telling them they're wrong. To reorient or not to reorient. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Yes or no, real quick? I know if some of you have been around working in the business or industry for a long time, there used to be reality orientation. That was kind of a standard. And in our centers, we would start with today is, you know, Wednesday the 3rd. And, you know, we were always kind of trying to bring people to reality. And that's really out of favor now. We don't want to correct or try to orient the person, you know, and again, especially with dementia, remember that it's their short term that memory that's really broken. Many of them still have long term memory intact, and they're sort of living in the past. And so they'll ask questions like, what time is my mother coming to pick me up? You know, their mother died 20 years ago. So, you know, in a case like that, which of these responses would be better? Your mother is dead, Ken. Your sister is picking you up at 4 o'clock. Or she'll be here in a little while. Let's get a dish of ice cream while we wait. Which one is better? It's pretty obvious. Just tell me.
The ice cream. The ice cream.
Yeah. I absolutely, absolutely. But believe it or not, years ago in our programs, you know, we believed in truth telling because I think I mentioned this before, all of us want to be ethical people and we all were raised to tell the truth. But remember last time I talked about the concept of therapeutic fibbing, and the point that I made is that we're looking at the end result being a calm client, right? And we want that good outcome. And so we're going to say things that bring peace of mind to our client as opposed to telling them the truth and feeling good about that ourselves. Uh, so obviously they're living in a different reality. They're going to say things that aren't true, and we're going to answer appropriately so that they don't experience further grief or agitation. Because whose reality is it? A person with dementia can no longer make sense of the present, and lost memories of years past become their new reality. And they even, in some cases are reliving past events. So we're not going to argue. It's not lying, as I said, it's respecting their reality and their dignity. And then this fourth concept is called life stories. And put simply, everybody has a life story that needs to be honored and respected. And when they can no longer tell their own story, it can still be used to really educate us about their care plan or their plan for activities. It's very similar to the concept of person-centered care. And so when they can no longer tell their stories, we're going to honor that. And we'll talk in just a few minutes more about person-centered care. Validation, we've talked about a lot. The emphasis here is on empathy, dignity, and understanding. It means the acceptance of the reality and personal truth of a person's experience. No matter how confused they are, we're going to validate what they're saying and what they're feeling. For example, if someone's hallucinating, they're seeing, aliens or creatures, we're not going to say there's nothing there, I don't see anything. We're going to say something like, oh, that's just so frightening for you. I'm here and I'm going to make sure that they can't hurt you. Or I'm going to make sure they go away. When we use this approach, it reduces stress and agitation and the need for medication. All of the things we're talking about are non-pharmacological approaches to managing behaviors. And we don't want to over-medicate people. None of us do. So these tips are all, just essential. And when we force a person with dementia to accept, our reality, a reality that they can no longer comprehend, it's just nothing more than cruel. So, and we know that emotions are what we're after, they're more important than words, and they help us to understand and guide our actions with our clients. So this is the same example as last week, when someone says that, someone stole their book, they often point the finger at us rather than tell them, no, no one stole your book. We're going to say, oh, that's scary. Let me help you find it. We're going to remain flexible. We know that what works today beautifully may work for a while, and then all of a sudden it's no longer working, and we have to come up with new creative solutions. So yeah, we've mentioned person-centered care, and we know that at the center of that is knowing the person, treating them with dignity and respect, understanding their point of view, the activities that they enjoy, their likes, their dislikes, the type of hobbies they've had, the work that they've done, and being flexible about, incorporating all of this into their day. So, a lot of the information we gather comes from the families. And I can't emphasize how important this is in terms of of making sure that we maintain their quality of life. And let me give you an example of this. I was doing some training at a care community in a memory care unit, and I was observing at lunchtime, and the staff was actually getting the lunch ready, and they were working in the kitchen, and uh, one of the residents kept coming into the kitchen and sort of getting in the way of the staff, and she was really trying to help, and they were they were taking her and leading her back out of the kitchen and seating her and telling her, lunch is not ready. You need to wait here. We'll tell you when it's ready. And they escorted her out of the kitchen several times, and it was just really painful for me to watch. And so, and this was a place that was supposedly using the person-centered approach. And so I, as the trainer, was able to look into the files and give him permission. And I looked in her file and I came back to the staff and said, this woman used to own and operate restaurants. That was her life work. And so knowing the occupation of what kind of work that your clients do is so key to this approach. And so I immediately had them give her a task, and she was very impaired, very, very late into the disease, still ambulatory and able to help. People want to help. They want to feel productive. And she was so happy to be engaged in her work. She put just simple paper placemats down at every place setting. So happy to be part of the restaurant team. And, just I could tell she was totally living in the past, back at work. And so I love this example because I think it really illustrates the importance of employing a person-centered approach. So she was very dignified. She felt respected. She was engaged in meaningful work, activities that she enjoyed, and felt a part of the team. And so when you know your clients and you know their life story, you are employing that person-centered approach and applying it, you can be assured that they will have a good quality of life. So, and I know all of you are doing that, and that's excellent. And we can't emphasize the dignity and respect enough. And we do that not only through our care, but through the language that we use. We use person-centered language and people first language. So a person is a person, not their disability. We don't identify them. We don't say that Alzheimer person. We say Jane has a diagnosis of Down syndrome, or we say George is living with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. We don't say things like that Down syndrome girl. We keep in mind that a lot of our clients may have experienced abuse in the past. We talked in our first session about the rocky start that many of our older clients had historically. So we know that we have to work to gain their trust when we first meet them and befriend them. We know that they can be fearful until they trust us. And we embrace the fact that these our individuals need relationships with others, that social engagement, and they need to be and deserve to be valued in their community. So I wanted to say a few words about family members, because we're not just caring for individuals living with IDD and AD, but we are also it's like one unit of care, our clients as well as their families. And especially when it comes to aging, we know that the families have been in the trenches for a very long time, whether or not they're living at home or in a group home, whatever setting. So we know that we're partnering with them. We want to keep open lines of communication. We can be educators, especially with our clients who are living with Down syndrome. We can inform their families If they ask questions about Alzheimer's disease, we can talk to them about the diagnosis or about that process. We can educate them about the disease. You can refer them to us, to our website, and let them know that we offer resources for families. We can provide listening and support, etc. So they're a big part of the equation. And I don't know for many of you how much contact you have with families. Do you interact a lot with them? Does anybody want to comment on that?
We interact with families, and of course, as the guys are aging, we move from interacting with their parents into interacting with their siblings or
With the
their
siblings.
cousins. And
Right.
so a lot of times they had a different role growing up as a sibling than the parent who was always a caretaker. So we find that when it transitions from parent to sibling support systems, that we have to not only tell them about how the system works and things like that, but what their role, how their role is changing as like the primary family member. You're now, instead of mom being the person who was going to make those medical decisions if there's no POA, now you're it. So we really need to talk about end of life planning and things like that. It's a whole different role when you transition
Absolutely.
from the parent to the sibling.
Absolutely. And we've seen evidence of that in our support groups. Um, we've for we've seen that where the role has had to transition, and we've seen siblings who have taken over as caregiver and had to move in from out of state, and really get connected to all the resources at the regional center and find a group home or find a home for them to live together in, etc. So it can be a tough transition. Yeah, absolutely. So we can, ask for input and opinions, again, the person-centered care, the care planning, all of that. It's important to maintain a good, strong relationship, be sensitive to their feelings, and we can use sensitive language too when we're talking about Alzheimer's disease. For example, I was very frank with all of you about the rapid progression, and we want to speak about that in sensitive terms and be sure to tell families that the course varies. The way people progress varies from individual to individual. And really the best thing is to refer them to our organization and to our website, etc. So you can click on our website, and then under programs and services, there's a drop-down menu, and we have a special page just for IDD and Down syndrome. Okay. All right, now I'm going to whip through the rest of this material pretty quickly, given that we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to talk about activities. So we want to promote success through failure-free activities, and really what failure-free means, that it means that we're going to emphasize their remaining abilities, not their losses, and we're going to adapt them. And I've talked about this. We break them into simple steps, and as time goes on, we step in more and more and provide that gentle guidance. And if things aren't working, we redirect into another activity. So the most successful activities are those that take advantage of their maintained skills, their long-held skills, and offer social interaction, a range of physical activity, and support their cognitive functioning level. And take a look at some of these activities. Music is always a hit. I'll let you read through these. Family visits, walks, massage, art, sensory things that provide stimulation like mobiles, fish tanks, things with texture like bean bags and cuddly toys, things with repetition that are physical if they're able and ambulatory. Music, music, music. I think that, all of this has to do with knowing the person. We know our clients, we know what's important to them, their preferences, their likes, their dislikes. That we and all of these things are sort of key. Good job with those 2 cases, and keep all of this information in mind. We're sort of running out of time here, but I want to just say that I have really enjoyed being with all of you over these past 3 sessions. And in conclusion, people living with IDD face unique challenges as they age, particularly when they develop dementia. I think we've really learned that as we've gone through these last 3 sessions. But in talking to all of you over these 3 occasions that we've had to spend together, I think you're all doing a great job and you're up for this challenge. It does call for a real shift in the way we think about this care and the way we apply this care that is different than before. We know that we have to go from trying to help people improve to just helping them maintain their functioning for as long as possible, and just really focus on their comfort and their safety, right? And we know that family members and staff alike face many challenges throughout this disease process, but that there are resources in place, particularly here in Orange County. And unlike the past, where there were no services, we now have this wonderful network of resources and programs like yours to support people living with intellectual and developmental disabilities, even when Alzheimer's comes to call. And thank you all for participating. And if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to our organization. Thank you so much, and goodbye.